Okay. All right. There we go. We had to restart this, so I apologize. There was some audio difficulty for some reason. My microphone was disabled. I don't know why, but hopefully I fixed the problem, and I'm sure you guys and girls will let me know. So, welcome to my program. My name is Chris, and this is my channel, Barnon 11970. And if you can hear me, just place it in the comments section so I know it's working. Hopefully it is at this point. I checked and saw it was disabled for some reason. So I fixed that, and we'll find out by one of my comments. So it is now 2:08 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 26th of May, the year 2017. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I was, in regards to videos I was watching last night. And a quick shout out to Robert J. Lyons. He just joined my Patreon account. So I thank you for that. And I want to give a shout out. And anybody want to check that out, the link is in the description. And they just gave me the notice that they can hear me. Excellent. All right. Yeah. So my microphone was for some reason disabled. I don't know why. So I'm glad you guys can hear me. All right. So we'll get into it now. And this is entitled What Technology Really Brings to Our Future. Now, I'm not into the fear porn or anything like that, but that doesn't mean we can't see alternative viewpoints, because it could create a lot of preventionary techniques. Because, for example, if you had a crystal ball and the crystal ball told you that at 2 p.m., if you go outside, you're going to be hit by a falling brick. Well, that sounds bad if it happens, but if you know it was going to happen and you don't go outside at 2 p.m., you won't get hit by that brick. So is it really bad? So it's all about perspective. So with that being said, I was watching a couple of videos last night, and in typical YouTube fashion, I get recommendations, and they tend to have every now and then some really different ones. So I check them out if they pique my curiosity. And I try and take advantage of the good parts of YouTube where you can actually learn things. I'm not there, you know, watching people do their nails and hair. That's just not my thing. So there was a video last night that I watched, and it's just the image. I don't have the link, unfortunately, because I watched so many last night, but just a picture that caught my eye. And it ended up this person that said that they were in the Philadelphia experiment in 1943, and they supposedly went into time into the year like 2100. Now, whether I believe in that or not, I probably don't. But it was just some of the things he talked about that made me think about what is the future really going to bring us when it comes to technology. So regardless of whether he did it or not, to me is irrelevant. I don't really believe it. It doesn't mean just because I don't believe it, it's not possible. But it was the message that I was concentrating on. And one of the things he talked about is supposedly in that time, socialism took over full force. And basically everything was free for everybody. And they said that eventually, they said it was an experiment to see if that would work, if communities could live together and everything could be free. You wouldn't have to work unless you wanted to. Everything that you wanted was there for your taking. The technology was supposedly so advanced, you'd live a comfortable life. Now, in retrospect, you think about that, it's like, wow, that seems like great. That's the ultimate utopia. But then they were talking about the fact of how that kind of society will always be doomed to fail. And you'd wonder why. It's like, well, if I get all this free stuff and everything's provided for me at the touch of a button, what could go wrong? And if you think about it, one of the points that they made, and this is the point I think is the most interesting, that when people get everything for free, there's no more incentive. Because think about it. Just imagine if you got out of bed, you had a computer or a robot or something, they would lift up the covers, they would get you undressed, they would dress you for you, you take your shower. You know, if at a push of a button, you could have any food that you desired, you could get anything you want. Well, what would motivate you to do anything? What would motivate people to create new things? Because if you had supposedly everything that you wanted, well, what would be the incentive to create? And if there's no incentive, how many people would want to learn about new things, especially when nobody's teaching it? Wouldn't we eventually get dumber and dumber because we would lose the ability to think? So if you think of, like, for example, that movie Idiocracy, where the future shows they have technology, but the people ended up becoming so incredibly stupid they didn't know how to use it or repair it. And that's why you see like garbage all over the place. If you haven't seen that movie, I highly recommend it because it's kind of one of many movies which I'll point out that kind of shows a future that's not what they really make you believe is going to happen. And I'll give you a couple of examples because one of the things I talk about all the time is if you are at a level where you can pay attention to codes and signals in TV shows, in movies, in music, all the time, there are hundreds of examples where if you know what to look for, you will get messages that kind of give you a clue of what's going on. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples. Like, for example, the image that you see was I think it was made for TV movie, but it was the Flintstones meet the Jetsons. Now, if you watch this movie, and I have, it's actually quite interesting because the whole concept of the movie starts out with the Jetsons and Elroy, which is the son. He's the smartest one in the family, and he builds a time machine. And with his father stressed out at work, they decide, you know what, we're going to take a vacation into the future. And somehow their dog, I forget his name, but that's irrelevant, hits into the machine and supposedly changes it and breaks it. So they end up thinking that they went into the past because they end up seeing the Flintstones. Well, it ends up they actually did go into the future because when they return, if you watch the movie again and pay close attention to the time machine, when they fix it, the Jetsons go to the past, which means they actually went back to their time. So the Flintstones were not in their past. Their Flintstones were actually in their future. Now think about it. The Jetsons, if you ever watched that TV show, and I'm from, I was born in 1970 and grew up in the 80s where there was a lot of Saturday morning cartoons, and the Flintstones was one of them. You see they have flying cars and they have cities on stilts. So you never ever see the ground. Well, what if, for example, like the movie WALL-E, we destroyed the planet and it was unlivable? Because you always see like a thick clouds. And they had to go above what could be a corrosive atmosphere due to the destruction of the technology. Due to technology. Because think about all the chimney stacks from all the corporations and factories around the world. How they chop down trees all the time. How it starts killing the forest. That can eventually cause a lot of damage. How we pollute the water. I mean, look at what happened with Fukushima. Look what happened in the Gulf of Mexico. And many places they probably haven't reported. The Exxon Valdez. So after centuries of destroying the planet, you could end up getting to the point where it's unlivable anymore. So what if the Jetsons were the peak of the technology, where they got to the point where they eventually destroyed themselves and had to start all over again, thus eventually creating the Flintstones? And you see many other examples of this. Think of the Planet of the Apes. Well, in that movie, supposedly you have scientists go into a rocket ship, and they were supposed to be, I don't know where they were going. I think they were supposed to visit other planets. It's been a while since I've seen the movie. But there was something, they go into hypersleep, I think for about 300 years. And there's something wrong with the ship, and they land on a planet where it's, overrun by smart apes. And they think they're just on some foreign world. And of course, spoiler alert, they find out at the end that it was actually their future, that we destroyed ourselves and life took over in a different way. So that's again in the future. Look again, if you ever see the movie The Time Machine. That movie shows that he goes I think 4,000 years into the future, and it ends up that there are the Morlocks that live underground, and then there's an above species, but they are almost like cavemen. If you look at the movie Aladdin, now you'd think again when they show that Disney movie, you'd like to think, well, that looks like it's set in the past because there's no cars, there's no planes, there's no technology. But yet you see when they have the genie, which was voiced by Robin Williams, rest his soul, he talks a lot about futuristic situations, supposedly. If you ever watch the movie, look at how many references he talks about, like today's modern actors. Well, if that was in the past, those people were not alive. So what if the Aladdin was actually in the future? Again, you know, technology ended up destroying everyone, and they had to start over again. Now, think of, for example, the TV show The Walking Dead. Now, obviously, I'm not talking about a zombie apocalypse, but what if something happened to the point where we had to start over again? And you didn't have the technology, you didn't have the electricity. You notice if you watch the show Walking Dead, now going into season 8 in a couple of months, they're not driving around in cars as much. Some people are driving on horseback. If you don't know how to make bullets, you eventually run out. There's no more grocery stores. There's no more TV repairmen. There's no cable. They're slowly going back to this caveman-like atmosphere. Because just imagine, this is only supposed to be, I think, in TV world, I think the 8 seasons is only supposed to represent about 2 years. Just imagine 25 years from that then. 50 years, 1,000 years. Where would they be? So technology, if you really think about it, it reaches a certain peak, which makes you wonder, are they trying to tell us that these things have happened before? Like if you think about the whole quote unquote theory of Atlantis, well, what if on several occasions throughout history, we get to a point where we reach a peak and then that technology gets us maybe so dumb because we have everything we don't need to learn and we don't advance anymore, so we hit a certain point where we start to decline or we destroy ourselves. And obviously with any kind of destruction, there are always going to be survivors. I mean, look just in the Bible when they talk about the Noah's Ark and the great floods, where there's always survivors. But if all your technology is wiped away and after centuries of losing your ability to learn, you're really not that smart anymore because you just had technology doing everything for you, how do you build up your society again? It would take probably thousands of years. So what if this is a whole cycle of things to come, where it's a warning that not to rely too much on technology? I mean, for example, look at the average person today. If they want to look things up, they don't go to the library. They don't go searching for books. They don't read information. They just Google something and they get the information right there. Look at, for example, in your vehicle. When you used to be lost, you used to communicate with people, ask for directions, or you'd pull out a map. Now, you just use your GPS signal. There's a point where technology can only reach a certain peak. I mean, I get people all the time. I mean, I'm a massage therapist. I've been a licensed massage therapist since I went to school in 1994, graduated on October 31st, 1995, officially became a licensed massage therapist and did my first work January 23rd of 1996. That's been a little while. But since the introduction of a regular used cell phone, more and more people come in with back, neck, and shoulder problems than ever before. Because of, especially with laptops and cell phones, you're constantly looking down, stretching your neck muscles, and people get migraines and headaches and like severe neck problems all the time now. And that's due to the technology. So if you really think about these things, that's why if you see more and more people are starting to try and get back to nature a little bit, not being so determined to have the technology of our future. Because, if robots were created, and you could see they're already starting to build robot technology. I mean, it's only a matter of time before they create some form of artificial intelligence, where if robots start doing everything for us, look at the movie WALL-E. In that movie WALL-E, for some reason they don't describe what happens, but we supposedly destroy the Earth to the point where it's no longer inhabitable. So they get on a spaceship and they basically spend centuries traveling around on the spaceship. And you could see over time, all of the passengers, including the captain of the ship, become overweight, out of shape, to the point where they can't even stand anymore. That their bones are so fragile, just to stand would injure them. And they have to be carried around in these floating chairs. being served everything by robots. So if you think about it, I mean, for those people, they can get whatever they want, but is that a life that people would want to lead? They wouldn't have to rely on their own thoughts or inventions or ideas or even communication, because everything could be sent via a computer message or handed to you from some kind of robotic technology. And at the end, you could see that when they fell off their chairs because they were heading back to Earth and they hit the Earth's gravitational pull, quote unquote, they could barely even stand. And they needed Wally to help them be able to restart the Earth. So if you think about how they say that, the world is endless, the universe is endless, how many times for thousands upon thousands of centuries has this situation reoccurred? Because, for example, if you think about The Walking Dead, they don't have video cameras anymore, or barely have them. And like I said, this is only about 2 years into their future. Eventually, things will just be written down on paper. How long do you think that paper will last? A couple of 100 years? What happens 10,000 years later? All of their technology is gone. Most of their history has disappeared. What if languages changed? How would you be able to understand what they were saying? Makes you really think about the fact that there were people at one point that used to carve things in stone, because that would send a message for a long period of time throughout history. And if you ever saw, I forget the name of the TV show, was I forget what channel, but it was talking about, I used to watch this years ago, about what would happen if people just disappeared. They didn't say how, they just said, what if one day every person was gone? What would happen to everything that was still there? And they said roughly after like 1,000 to 5,000 years, which is not a long time if you think about the grand scheme of things, all buildings would be unrecognizable. Because after a few years of no maintenance, things would start to rust, windows would start to break, the water would start deteriorating everything inside, and eventually it would all come collapsing down on itself, crumble down to the ground. Eventually, dirt and debris and leaves and nature will cover it over, and one day it just looks like a mountain. The only reason that doesn't happen is we have people with maintenance. Just imagine, if nobody raked their leaves for 100 years, you would never know there were roads. They'd probably be 20 feet underground. And that's why you see when they're always looking at technology, things in the past, they have to dig for them. Because the earth just basically starts things over again. So it really makes you wonder about, is technology as good as you think it is? Or is it a form of control to make you no longer as smart as you once were? Make you no longer as motivated as you once were? And look at today with all the healthcare programs, with all the food stamp programs, and all the government programs there to quote unquote help you. Now, obviously, there are some people that need that, but there are many people that take advantage of this. And I know this for a fact because a couple of years ago, I used to have a tenant that used to live here. He was a friend of the family since the 80s. And he was about 600 pounds. He had a stroke. He was overweight. He was at the point where he couldn't really do anything. And I used to help him. I used to go food shopping for him. And when he needed to go and get his whatever government checks, I would go there and wait online for him. And there were plenty of people there that were waiting on the welfare line that had pretty expensive shoes, had the latest cell phones, looked like they had a lot of money, taking advantage of the situation. But if you think about it, what motivates you to get a job and to work if you are getting everything for free? What would make you motivate yourself to work out, to be healthy, to get out when people could sit in front of their laptops or their TVs all day? And just imagine the new technology when they're talking about, virtual reality. What if it gets to the point where you could just connect in and be anyone you want and go anywhere you want? How many people would spend their lives in that chair, basically rotting away? So I gave just a couple of examples that you could check. If you haven't seen these movies or watched the TV shows, I highly recommend it and think of it in a different way. So we have the Flintstones meet the Jetsons. Watch that and see. Because at the end, when the Flintstones went to the Jetsons' time, the way they get around it is the time machine breaks. But for some reason, there's just some residue left over that brings them back to where they were. So you don't know in the end, did they go to the future or did they go to the past? You don't know. That's what I find interesting. But if you look in the middle, when supposedly they have the problem that happens where the Jetsons end up in the Flintstones' time and the Flintstones end up in the Jetsons' time, you could see what direction they actually did head. Just pay attention to the lever switch on the time machine. But watch the Planet of the Apes, the original one from the 60s. Watch the TV show The Walking Dead. Rewatch Aladdin and think about that. All the references that the genie makes. The movie Wall-E. The movie The Time Machine. These are all things that maybe they're just telling us what is in your future. And it's not what you think it is. So hopefully it will help you to think in a different way. And instead of, going on your computer to see a nice sunny day or a nice lake or ocean wave, go to the real thing, experience nature, experience the benefit of the sunlight instead of the false light, which is your fluorescent light bulbs. Motivate yourself. Get back to nature. Eat healthier. Because, like they say, be careful what you wish for. You may get it. So I'm glad this video was able to come through. I apologize for the little bit of a delay. Check out my Patreon if you want to join it. It's not mandatory. Leave your comments, especially after this video uploads. We always love to hear what you have to say. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen and for your comments. And again, a quick shout out to Robert J. Lyons, who just joined my Patreon account recently. The link is in the description if you're interested in that. But I want to thank everybody so much. And if you know of any other movies or books or TV shows or music that points out these kind of things that I talked about, please put them in the comments section. And when this uploads, hit the like button and the share button, because YouTube is going to hide this as much as they can, because they don't like people that free think or think for themselves. They want you to be sitting and obedient. They want you to have somebody tell you what the future is or what you're supposed to do. They want you to sit back, don't do anything. We'll protect you. We'll feed you. We'll provide for you. We'll do everything for you. And if you think that's a good thing, look at some of the examples. They're kind of warning you of what that leads to. And the good thing about knowing about these things, when you see it in a learning perspective, you can learn that, well, do you want that kind of future? And if the answer is no, you have the ability to do something to change it, because it hasn't happened yet. So thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy what I have to say. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Check out other of my videos.